Well, hello there, fifth graders. Mr. Greenfield here. Today, we're going to be working on this benchmark on determining whether an equation or an inequality that has a variable in it is true or false for the given value of that variable. Actually, today we're just going to be working on this part of the benchmark. And tomorrow, you'll be introduced to inequalities and focusing on the benchmark a little further in that lesson. Yesterday, we looked at expressions. So I just want to clarify the difference between expression and an equation. Remember, an expression uses numbers, variables, different mathematical operations such as multiplication, subtraction, addition, division. In this case, we have an expression. So if I was given a value for m, I'd be asked to solve this expression. The difference between an expression and an equation is this symbol right here. We have an equal sign. That's what differentiates an equation from an expression. We can look at it as a giant seesaw or a pan balance, whereas everything on this side of the equation is the same as everything on this side, or in other words, they're equivalent. So if we know that, and we're given values for these variables, when we solve the left side of this equation, it should be equivalent to the right side. And if it is, that equation would be considered true. If not, we would mark that it's false. So here's an example. Let's look at this equation here. We have 4 plus 3p is equivalent to 16 when p is equal to 4. Now, if we remember order of operations, if we go back and look at our equation, we have two mathematical operations. We have addition, and anytime we have a number next to a variable, that means it's multiply. So if I remember from order of operations, Mrs. Kelzer did a review of that the other day. We have to multiply before we add. So we would have to solve this part of the equation first. So I have 4 plus 3 times the value of p, it says, is 4. 3 times 4 is going to be equal to 16. So now I should be able to solve my equation. 3 times 4 is 12. I'm going to solve this part first, and then I'm going to add 4 to that. And that should equal 16 if this is a true equation. So if I look at this and I add those together, I get 16 is equal to 16. Now they want us to determine by putting this variable 4, is this equation true? Does 16 equal 16? Yes, it is. So this equation for that variable is true. If I look at the next one, they want me to input the value of 3 in place of m. So I would take 3, input 3 in there. So 3 times 3 minus 6 is the same as 5. Well, I know that 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract 6 is the same as 5. 9 minus 6 is 3. 3 is the same as 5. Is 3 equivalent to 5? No, we know it's not. So therefore, if I use this value for the variable m, this equation would be false. If we look at another example here, this one's involving division. We have e divided by 4 minus 2 is the same as 5 when e is 32. So we need to input that value in for e. So I'm going to have 32 divided by 4 minus 2 is equivalent or the same as 5. Now, if we remember from order of operations, we have to divide before we subtract. So we're going to have to do this part of our equation first. 32 divided by 4 is 8, minus 2 is 5. Well, I know that 8 minus 2 here is actually 6. So we can see that this equation, or if we look at it as a pan balance, it would not be balanced. Or if this was a seesaw, this side would be heavier than that side. So we would have to say that if I use the value 32 for the variable e, my equation is going to be false. It is not going to be equivalent. Now, this one, as you can see, we've got variables, we've got multiple operations, we've got parentheses. So we really need to be aware of the order of operations, making sure that we're doing this correctly. So it's ideal to take our time, think about it. They want us to use 6 for x. So I'm going to input that in here. So once again, I remember that a number next to a variable means multiply. So this is going to be 3 times 6. Excuse me, 6. I wrote 3 here. Well, I was saying 3 and I wrote 3. 3 times 6. I'm going to add to that 2 times the parenthesis x minus 4. And we know that x is 6, so I'm going to input that in there in its place. And all of that is supposed to be equivalent to 22. Well, if I remember from order of operations, I need to do my parentheses first. So I know that 3 times 6 plus 2 times 6 minus 4. I know 6 minus 4 is 2. So my new math problem looks like this. My equation has been simplified. I'm going to simplify it further. I know that 3 times 6 is 18. And I'm going to add that to 2 times 2, which is 4. And that should be equivalent to 22. Well, I know that 18 plus 4 is 22. So my equation says that 22 is the same as 22. That is true. So I know my answer to that one would be true here. Now today, you will have an assignment in Google Classroom. That assignment is going to have the same problems that you're going to see on this page. And your teacher will have put that in Google Classroom. You're going to have 6 different algebraic equations where they're going to give you a value for the variable. You're going to need to input that and determine, is that true or false? Remembering we're still working on this benchmark. We're trying to determine whether an equation or inequality that involves a variable is true or false when you're given a value for that variable. They are giving you a value for that variable. You have to input that in there, follow the order of operations, and determine, is that going to be true or false? Now, as you get further down your Google Classroom assignment, at the bottom, they're going to still use that same benchmark, but this time they're going to give you an equation, and they're going to give you 4 different choices of values to input for that variable to make the equation true. 3 of these are false. Only one of them is going to make that equation true. You're going to have to determine which one. Same with question 8. Now, if you can't find your assignment in Google Classroom or it's not working for some reason, we did put a link with this sheet so you could actually copy these math problems on paper pencil and do them separately. But I encourage you to do the Google form in Google Classroom instead, because then you can get immediate feedback, because it will correct your responses and let you know which ones you got right, which ones you got wrong, and what the correct answer would be. So if you have any questions on that, I'd please contact your math teacher as you go through that. All right, well, thank you, 5th graders. If you have any questions, just let one of us know, and we'd be happy to help.